This is the first episode of photography tips and tutorials that I'm going to do, and this video is about prime lenses versus zoom lenses. We're going to talk about the pros and cons and the differences between the two.
100 grams.
There's something about walking on fresh snow that's not got any prints on it whatsoever that feels wrong, but I kind of like it though. A prime lens and a zoom lens, what's the main difference? That's kind of in the name. Prime lens does not zoom, a zoom lens does, so you can change the focal length of a zoom lens, and you cannot do that on a prime lens. Let's talk about prime lenses first, using the Sony 24mm G lens as the practice lens. Like I said a second ago, a prime lens doesn't zoom, so if I want to get closer to something, I have to physically walk up to it. If I want to zoom out, I've got to walk away from it. So your zoom is your body. Seems kind of inconvenient, and at times it is, but there are a lot of pros to having a prime lens, and here's a quick list. Number one, prime lenses are usually smaller, so profile-wise, this is pretty small and lightweight compared to a zoom lens. Two, prime lenses are much less expensive in general than zoom lenses. Three, this kind of goes along with number two, but prime lenses generally have a more wide-open aperture than the zoom counterpart for much less money. And four, sometimes having a fixed focal length will help you take better photos because it constricts what you can and can't do. With less ability to change what you're doing with your gear, you're forced to be more creative with how you take photos, change your angles, get closer, get farther away, and I think that prime lenses definitely help you grow as a photographer. So the biggest con to a prime lens is the fact that it can't zoom. So if I want to take a picture of something but I'm blocked from taking a picture, maybe there's like a bridge in the way, I can't zoom in on the photo, I just have to take it where I'm at. Also, because you can't zoom, you're stuck with that one focal length, and that might not be the ideal focal length for what you want to take a photo of. For example, if I was shooting street photography on a 24mm lens, which is a pretty wide open lens, and then I wanted to do some portraits, I could do portraits on that 24, but they don't look as good as if I had an 85, for example. So a lot of people, including myself, carry multiple prime lenses so that they can have a lens for every situation, and it does get kind of cumbersome carrying all these lenses and switching them out every time you want to do something different. Moving on to zoom lenses. So zoom lenses, obviously they zoom, so I can go from, on this lens, a 28mm to a 75mm focal length, a decently wide focal length to a pretty tight focal length, great for portraits and things like that. This one is a Tamron 28 to 75mm, 2.8 all the way through, meaning that it's 2.8 at 28mm and 2.8 at 75mm. So let's talk about the pros of having a zoom lens. Number one, you don't have to move to take a photo of something if you're not close enough to it. I can see you just fine from here, but I can see you even better now. Having the ability to change your focal length can be really beneficial if you're shooting something like an event, like a wedding perhaps. You'll want to be able to get zoomed in portraits of people getting married, but also zoomed out wide shots of more than one person in a photo. So for that purpose, a zoom lens is perfect because I'm wide right here, and then I'm tight in right here. So a big pro for a zoom lens is that because it's all in one, you can do more than one thing with a single lens. Let's talk about the cons of a zoom lens though. First one is the size and weight. This is the size of the 28 to 75 zoom, and this is the size of the 24mm. See the difference right here? This one also weighs quite a bit more. Also, getting a constant aperture on a zoom lens is generally much more expensive than just finding a prime that has a lower aperture. So this lens right here is a 12mm to 24mm f4, but getting this exact same lens in an f2.8 is much more expensive. Also, zoom lenses aperture generally don't open up to as much as prime lenses do. Trying to find a prime lens that goes down to 1.8, 1.7, even 1.2 is pretty easy, but trying to find a zoom lens that does that exact same is almost impossible in some circumstances. So that's the difference between a zoom lens and a prime lens. Personally, I use all of them. So as you can see, I've got a 12 to 24 right here. I really like to use this lens for real estate. I like this lens, which is a 28 to 75 for general use. I use it for video a lot. I use it for portraits as well. I like my 24mm lens for a do-it-all kind of lens, like street photography, sometimes portraits, landscapes, and things like that. And then my 85 I use almost exclusively for portraits. So if you're trying to figure out what lens do you want, a prime lens or a zoom lens, think about the pros and the cons and what you're going to be using your lens most for. Thanks for watching the first episode of Photography Tips and Tricks. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you are a new photographer, be sure to stick around because I'll do more of these videos. If you're an existing photographer, then I'm sure you already knew this stuff, but hey, maybe I said something that you agree with or disagree with. Let me know in the comments.